The massive Arcadian vessel emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, its crystalline hull refracting starlight in mesmerizing patterns. On Earth's orbital defense stations, alarms blared as sensors detected the unprecedented energy signature. Within minutes, the United Earth Defense Council convened in their underground chamber beneath Geneva. Admiral Sarah Chen studied the holographic projection of the alien ship, her weathered face illuminated by its glow. "It's 3 times the size of anything we've ever built," she reported, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "And those energy readings suggest technology far beyond our current understanding." The alien vessel had made no aggressive moves, instead broadcasting a message on all frequencies in perfect English. "Greetings, people of Earth. We are the Arcadian Empire, a peaceful civilization seeking diplomatic relations with emerging spacefaring species. Over the next 3 months, the Arcadians presented themselves as benevolent mentors. Their ambassador, a tall, ethereal being named Adler, charmed world leaders with promises of technological and medical advances. But deep in the analytical centers of intelligence agencies worldwide, patterns began to emerge that told a different story. Dr. James Okonjo, head of the newly formed Sinological Intelligence Division, noticed it first. The Arcadians' seemingly generous offers of technology, all centered around transportation and communication infrastructure. Their diplomatic compound in Nebel required unusual power readings for its size, and their ships, while officially on courtesy visits, were mapping Earth's defense capabilities. "They're following their standard conquest playbook," Dr. Okonjo explained to the Defense Council, displaying historical data from other civilizations. "The same pattern repeats across 12 known species: peaceful contact, infrastructure integration, then swift military takeover once their forces are in position." But humanity had an advantage the Arcadians hadn't counted on. Unlike the other species they conquered, humans had a long history of deception and counter-deception. Centuries of espionage, counterintelligence, and psychological warfare had bred a healthy paranoia into human institutional DNA. While publicly embracing the Arcadians' overtures, Earth's nations secretly began preparing. Underground facilities were expanded. Quantum computing research was accelerated. Most importantly, human scientists began studying the subtle weaknesses in Arcadian technology that their arrogance had allowed them to display. The key breakthrough came from Dr. Maya Patel's team at the Bangalore Institute of Technology. They discovered that Arcadian neural link systems, while incredibly advanced, were vulnerable to specific patterns of quantum interference. It was a small weakness, but in the hands of a species that had perfected the art of asymmetric warfare, it could prove decisive. As the Arcadian invasion fleet assembled under the guise of a cultural exchange ceremony, humanity was ready. Not with overwhelming force. That would have been impossible, but with something far more dangerous. A species that had spent its entire history learning to defeat more powerful opponents. Admiral Chen stood at the window of her orbital office, watching another Arcadian ship arrive through the pretense of diplomacy. She smiled slightly, knowing that beneath the surface of every major city, in hardened bunkers and hidden laboratories, humanity was preparing a welcome their would-be conquerors would never forget. "Let them come," she whispered, her breath fogging the reinforced glass. "We've been preparing for this our entire history. We just didn't know it." In the depths of their crystalline ships, the Arcadians continued their preparation. Ambassador Adler's holographic image appeared on emergency broadcasts worldwide, his once friendly demeanor replaced by cold superiority. "Your species has been selected for integration into the Arcadian Empire. Resist, and you will be decimated. Submit, and you may serve as productive members of our civilization." But even as the message played, humanity's carefully laid plans sprang into action. In orbit, seemingly defenseless satellites suddenly activated masked energy signatures, releasing quantum interference pulses that disrupted Arcadian targeting systems. On the ground, civilian infrastructure transformed. revealing hidden military capabilities that had been disguised as mundane urban development. The first wave of Arcadian ground forces landed outside major cities, their troops protected by energy shields that had proved invincible against other conquered species. They advanced with methodical precision, expecting minimal resistance. Instead, they walked into killing fields of carefully prepared ambushes. Dr. Maya Patel's quantum interference technology proved its worth in the first hour. Arcadian neural link systems, which gave their soldiers superhuman coordination, began failing in seemingly random patterns. Troops that had trained to fight as perfectly synchronized units suddenly found themselves in chaos. Their greatest strength is their greatest weakness, Dr. Patel explained to military commanders from her bunker beneath Bangalore. Their neural links are so integrated into their combat systems that when they fail, their soldiers are actually less effective than baseline organic fighters. They've become too dependent on their technology. In New York, an Arcadian battle group pushed through the city's apparently abandoned streets. Their sensors showed no human life signs, a technological deception crafted by Dr. Okonjo's team. The aliens' first warning came when the buildings themselves seemed to attack, metamorphic concrete structures shifting to trap and separate their forces. Decades of research into programmable matter, disguised as routine infrastructure upgrades, paid off in devastating fashion. Admiral Chen coordinated the orbital defense from her mobile command center deep within the Rockies. "Status report," she demanded, watching the tactical display as thousands of small, stealthy human craft emerged from hidden bases. "The Arcadians are struggling to maintain formation, Admiral," her XO reported. "Their ships rely on quantum-linked targeting for precision attacks. Without it, their energy weapons are hitting empty space, while our kinetic rounds are finding their marks." But the Arcadians weren't the most powerful empire in the galaxy for nothing. As their initial strategies failed, they adapted. New frequencies were deployed for their neural networks. Battle tactics shifted to account for human deception. The invaders began using overwhelming force to compensate for their degraded precision. Cities burned. Millions fled to underground shelters. The Arcadian advance slowed but didn't stop. Yet even as human casualties mounted, Earth's defenders felt a growing sense of confidence. Every Arcadian adaptation was met with a new counter. Every tactical shift was anticipated and planned for. In orbit, the space battle evolved into a deadly dance. Human ships, despite their technological inferiority, demonstrated maneuvers that the Arcadians' tactical computers insisted were impossible. Crews who had trained in simulators for years executed complex formations that turned their ships' weaknesses into strengths. "They don't understand," Admiral Chen told her staff 3 months into the war. The basement of MIT's Material Sciences building had become an impromptu research center. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before a holographic display of a crashed Arcadian fighter, her team working frantically around her. The ship's crystalline hull had been the source of their shield's apparent invulnerability. Until now. "The crystals aren't just for protection," she explained to the gathered military officials. "They're living technology, almost like programmable matter but far more advanced. They respond to specific frequencies of energy to create their defensive matrices. But there's a pattern to it, a pattern we can disrupt." Across the globe, similar breakthroughs were emerging from the crucible of necessity. Humanity's greatest minds, connected through quantum-encrypted networks, shared discoveries, and built upon each other's innovations. The Arcadians' superior technology, rather than ensuring their victory, had provided humanity with the tools for its own salvation. In orbit, Admiral Chen's forces had adopted hit-and-run tactics that frustrated the Arcadian fleet. Human ships, now equipped with reverse-engineered stealth systems, struck from seemingly impossible angles. The Arcadians' perfect formation-based combat proved increasingly ineffective against an enemy that refused to fight by conventional rules. "They expect us to engage them ship to ship," Chen briefed her commanders. "Instead, we're fighting like submarine wolves, striking from the depths of space and disappearing before they can respond." Their tactical computers can't predict what their logic says is impossible. But the most significant breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. James Okonjo's teenage daughter, Amara, had been playing with captured Arcadian neural link fragments when she noticed something remarkable. The links didn't just connect their users, they fundamentally altered how their brains processed information. They've engineered themselves for perfect order, Amara explained, her excitement cutting through her usual shyness. Their neural networks can't handle cognitive dissonance. They literally can't process contradictory information without experiencing system-wide failures. This discovery led to the development of what soldiers would later call chaos bombs, devices that broadcast contradictory sensory information directly into Arcadian neural networks. The effect was devastating. Entire battalions of Arcadian troops would freeze in confusion, their enhanced minds unable to reconcile the conflicting data. Meanwhile, Dr. Maya Patel's team had succeeded in adapting Arcadian crystal technology for human use. The first hybrid vessels began emerging from hidden shipyards, combining human intuitive design with salvage Arcadian tech. These ships, though fewer in number, could stand toe-to-toe with their alien counterparts. "We're not trying to copy their technology exactly," Patel explained during a test flight. "We're adapting it to work with human thought patterns instead of against them. Our chaos becomes our strength." The war's tide hadn't turned yet, but a new equilibrium had emerged. The Arcadians still held orbital superiority over much of Earth, but their ground forces were increasingly bogged down in an unwinnable guerrilla war. Every victory they achieved came at a catastrophic cost. In hidden bases across the planet, humanity's resistance grew stronger. Cities had been lost, but their populations had escaped into vast underground complexes that had been prepared in secret. These shelters became factories and laboratories, producing new weapons and technologies that combined human ingenuity with captured Arcadian tech. Supreme Commander Vexthal faced mounting pressure from the Imperial Council. The campaign that should have been a simple conquest had become a grinding war of attrition. Worse, human innovations were beginning to spread to other conquered species, inspiring resistance movements across the Empire. "These humans," he reported to his superiors, "they don't just adapt to technology. They transform it. They take our perfect systems and deliberately introduce imperfections that somehow make them more effective. It defies all logical analysis." The humans had learned something else as well. The Arcadian command structure was rigid and hierarchical. By forcing them to adapt quickly to new threats, they were creating stress fractures in the Empire's carefully ordered military machine. Dr. Rodriguez stood in her lab, examining the latest breakthrough in crystal manipulation. They thought their technology made them invincible, she mused, watching the hybrid crystal reshape itself according to human brainwave patterns. They never considered that giving us access to it would be their biggest mistake. As the war entered its fourth month, humanity's innovations were accelerating. Each Arcadian response was met with 3 new human adaptations. The Empire's technological advantage was being steadily eroded by a species that treated warfare not as a science of perfection, but as an art of creative destruction. Operation Pandora began at midnight UTC. Across the globe, resistance cells activated hidden transmitters broadcasting carefully crafted interference patterns. In orbit, Admiral Chen's fleet emerged from their camouflaged positions in the asteroid belt. The counteroffensive that humanity had spent months preparing was finally underway. The first sign that something was different came when Arcadian neural link systems began experiencing cascading failures across their entire network. Dr. Amara Okonjo's research had led to a breakthrough. The discovery that their entire command and control structure was vulnerable to synchronized chaos theory attacks. Their neural networks don't just connect their soldiers, she had explained during the operations planning. They connect their entire military hierarchy. By introducing calculated disorder at key nodes, we can create a ripple effect that disrupts their entire command structure. The Arcadian response was immediate but uncoordinated. Ships that had maintained perfect formation for months began breaking ranks, their crews struggling to maintain control as contradictory orders flooded their neural channels. On the ground, their forces started receiving phantom commands, unable to distinguish real orders from induced hallucinations. Admiral Chen watched from her command ship as the carefully orchestrated plan unfolded. The hybrid vessels developed by Dr. Rodriguez's team led the charge, their human crews working in perfect harmony with adapted Arcadian crystal technology. Unlike the rigid, hierarchical control systems of their enemies, these ships embraced controlled chaos as a tactical advantage. "All units, execute pattern Prometheus," Chen commanded. The human fleet split into seemingly random groups, executing maneuvers that appeared suicidal to Arcadian tactical computers. But there was method in the madness. Each erratic movement was precisely calculated to exploit gaps in the enemy's disrupted defense grid. On the ground, the tide turned even more dramatically. Dr. Patel's quantum interference technology had evolved into what soldiers called Babel fields, zones where Arcadian neural links became worse than useless, trapping their troops in loops of conflicting sensory data. Entire divisions found themselves unable to fight effectively, their superior training and technology becoming a liability rather than an asset. Supreme Commander Vexthal watched in horror as his perfect military machine began to break apart. "Impossible," he muttered, watching tactical displays show human forces emerging from hidden bunkers worldwide. Their resistance should have been broken months ago. How can they still have such coordinated strength? The answer lay in humanity's decentralized approach to warfare. While the Arcadians relied on rigid chains of command, human forces operated with remarkable autonomy. Each resistance cell, each military unit, could adapt and innovate independently while still working toward a common goal. In the skies above major cities, the spectacle was breathtaking. Hybrid human vessels, their crystalline hulls glowing with controlled energy patterns, engaged Arcadian ships in battles that resembled deadly dances. The humans had learned to use the living crystal technology not just as a weapon, but as an extension of their own intuition. "They're not just fighting the technology anymore," Dr. Rodriguez observed from her command center. "They're fighting the fundamental assumptions behind it." The Arcadians built their empire on the idea that perfect order equals perfect power. We're proving that controlled chaos is stronger. The battle for Earth's orbit reached its climax when Admiral Chen's flagship, the Phoenix, engaged Vexthal's command vessel. The human ship, despite being half the size of its Arcadian counterpart, moved with an agility that seemed to defy physics. Its hybrid crystal hull flowed like liquid metal, adapting to each attack while channeling power to its weapons in ways the Arcadians had never imagined possible. "You don't understand what you're facing," Chen transmitted to her counterpart as the Phoenix executed another impossible maneuver. "We're not just using your technology, we're evolving it. Every weakness you thought you found in us became a strength. Every advantage you held became a vulnerability." As the battle entered its 12th hour, the Arcadian fleet began to break apart. Ships that had once moved with mechanical precision now fled in disarray, their crews overwhelmed by the combination of technological disruption and tactical chaos. On the ground, their forces retreated to fortified positions, but even these strongholds were compromised by humanity's newfound capabilities. Victory wasn't complete. The Arcadian Empire still held vast power, and many of their forces remained combat effective. But as Earth's defenders pressed their advantage, a fundamental truth became clear. Humanity had not just survived the invasion, they had transformed it into an opportunity for unprecedented advancement. The turning point had arrived, not through overwhelming force or superior technology, but through humanity's unique ability to embrace chaos, adapt to adversity, and turn their enemies' strengths against them. The perfect order of the Arcadian Empire had been undone by the creative disorder of human warfare. The Arcadian Empire's Grand Council convened in an emergency session for the first time in 3 centuries. The holographic chamber filled with the projected forms of the Empire's highest authorities, their crystalline bodies reflecting their agitation in shifting patterns of light. Before them stood Supreme Commander Vexthal, about to deliver the most difficult report of his career. "The Earth campaign has failed," he stated, his form dimming in submission. "In 6 months, we have lost more ships and personnel than in the previous 1,000 years of expansion. But more concerning is what the humans have done with our technology." Displays materialized around the chamber, showing human hybrid vessels performing maneuvers that defied Arcadian physics models. The crystalline technology that had been the Empire's greatest achievement had been transformed into something new, something that merged order and chaos in ways their scientists had thought impossible. Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity was discovering that victory had brought more than just freedom. The technological leaps made during the war had catapulted their civilization centuries forward. Dr. Rodriguez's team had only begun to explore the possibilities of the hybrid crystal tech, while Dr. Patel's quantum interference theories were revolutionizing physics. Admiral Chen stood before the United Earth Defense Council, her uniform bearing new insignia that represented humanity's first unified space force. "The Arcadians are retreating, but we can't assume they'll stay away. More importantly, they're not the only power in the galaxy. We need to prepare for what comes next." That preparation took an unexpected turn when the first diplomatic messages arrived, not from the Arcadians, but from other species. Word of humanity's victory had spread through the galaxy's quantum communication networks. A species that could defeat the Arcadian Empire using their own technology against them was one that demanded attention. Dr. Amara Okonjo, now heading her own research division despite her youth, made another breakthrough while studying the diplomatic transmissions. These other species, they're not just impressed by our victory. They're inspired by it. We've shown them something they thought was impossible, that the perfect can be defeated by the adaptable. The truth of her words became apparent as reports filtered in from across Arcadian space. Other subjugated species, emboldened by Earth's example, were beginning to resist. They weren't just copying human tactics, they were adapting them to their own unique characteristics and circumstances. The rigid order of the Empire was cracking under the weight of countless small rebellions. In response, the Arcadian Grand Council made an unprecedented decision. A new diplomatic vessel approached Earth, its crystalline hull deliberately dimmed in a gesture of humility. Ambassador Xadler, who had once delivered threats of subjugation, now came with a different message. The gathering in Geneva was broadcast globally as Xadler addressed the United Earth government. "We came to your world believing we were perfect," the ambassador stated, their form shifting in patterns that humans now recognize as indicating deep emotion. "You showed us that perfection is stagnation, and adaptation is true strength. The Arcadian Empire wishes to learn from humanity." The treaty that followed reshaped the galaxy's political landscape. Earth would not join the Empire, but would instead become the founding member of a new galactic coalition, an alliance of species dedicated to combining their strengths rather than imposing uniformity. The Arcadian Empire, facing internal pressure from its own populations, began a gradual transformation into a more flexible and adaptive civilization. Dr. Maya Patel, speaking at the first Galactic Scientific Congress, summed up the profound change that had occurred. The Arcadians thought they were uplifting primitive species to their level of perfection. Instead, humanity showed the galaxy that imperfection, the ability to adapt, to change, to embrace chaos and learn from it, is the true path to advancement. Admiral Chen watched from her new office on Lunar Command as ships from a dozen species docked at Earth's orbital stations. Human hybrid technology was being shared with their new allies, while Earth's universities filled with students from across the galaxy, all eager to learn what humanity called innovative thinking, the art of controlled chaos. "We never wanted to rule the galaxy," she reflected, observing a group of Arcadian engineers working alongside human scientists on a new class of exploration vessel. "We just wanted to survive." But in proving we could survive against the greatest power in known space, we showed everyone, including ourselves, that the future belongs to those who can adapt. The war that was meant to be a simple conquest had instead become a turning point in galactic history. Humanity had not just defended itself, it had introduced a new paradigm to a galaxy that had grown stagnant in its pursuit of perfection. Their victory wasn't just about defeating an enemy, it was about showing a better way forward. As the sun set on this new era, ships of all species lifted off from Earth's spaceports, carrying with them not just hybrid technology, but something far more valuable: the human lessons of innovation, adaptation, and the strength found in embracing imperfection. The galaxy would never be the same, and humanity was ready to help guide it into an uncertain but exciting future.